Welcome back to our series on the most absurd emperors in Chinese history. So far, we've seen rulers obsessed with war, paranoid tyrants, and extravagant spendthrifts. But today's subject? He was different.
Oh, he was absurd. All right. But in a way unlike any other. Meet Li Yu, the last ruler of Southern Tang, a man who ruled like a poet and lived like a tragic hero.
Imagine an emperor more interested in composing poetry than governing his crumbling kingdom, a ruler who preferred the arts over armies and romance over realpolitik.
And trust me, by the end of this, you'll see why he earned his place on our list of the most absurd rulers in history.
Even before becoming emperor, Li Yu was already famous, but not for his leadership skills.
He was known for his poetry, calligraphy, and love of music. A true artist. But that hardly prepared him to rule a kingdom on the brink of collapse.
Picture this. While young princes of other states studied the art of war and governance, Li Yu was busy perfecting his verses about moonlit nights and fleeting romance.
To be fair, his poetry was good, so good that it's still read today. One of his most famous lines was, "How much sorrow can one have? It's like a river of spring water flowing east."
问君能有几多愁，恰似一江春水向东流.
His father, Emperor Li Jing, was well aware of his son's unusual priorities. But when the time came, Li Yu ascended the throne anyway. And that's when things got really interesting.
So, what does a poet-emperor do when he takes the throne? Strengthen his military? Reform the government? Secure alliances?
Nope. He turned the imperial palace into a grand artistic retreat. Imagine a kingdom where policy meetings started with poetry readings.
And if you wanted an audience with the emperor, you had to sit through a recital first. Hope you liked poetry, because that was the price of admission.
The problem? While Li Yu was busy perfecting his prose, his kingdom was crumbling. Ministers warned him, generals pleaded with him, but he just kept writing.
It wasn't just poetry. The emperor was also obsessed with theater, music, and painting. He even had actors and musicians live in the palace to entertain him daily.
Which might have been fine if his kingdom wasn't under constant threat of invasion.
And then there was his love life. If there's one thing Li Yu took as seriously as poetry, it was romance.
His palace became a paradise of music, wine, and countless consorts. He surrounded himself with beautiful women, indulging in extravagant feasts and endless nights of entertainment.
Among them, one stood out, Zhou the consort. She wasn't just a lover, she was his muse, inspiring some of his most passionate poetry.
But there was one problem. Zhou had been his brother's wife before she became his consort.
Yeah, that was awkward. It caused quite a scandal. But Li Yu was too smitten to care.
And while he was lost in love, the world outside the palace kept changing. The Song Dynasty was rising, and they had their eyes on his kingdom.
While Li Yu was composing poetry, the Song Empire was expanding rapidly. And guess what? They were coming for Southern Tang.
You'd think Li Yu would prepare for war, right? Nope. He believed he could charm his way out of conquest.
That strategy didn't exactly work. The Song army marched in, and Southern Tang fell without much of a fight.
It was almost too easy. One by one, Li Yu's city surrendered, and soon the poet emperor found himself a prisoner of the Song court.
And that's where his story takes a dark turn.
Captivity didn't break Li Yu. It inspired him. Some of his greatest works came from his years as a captive in the Song court.
But his captors weren't impressed. The Song emperor, Zhao Kuangying, initially treated him well but grew increasingly frustrated with his nostalgia for the fallen Southern Tang.
And that's where his most haunting poetry emerged. In exile, he wrote, "The carved balustrades and jade steps remain, but the faces of those who walk them have changed."
雕栏玉砌应犹在，只是朱颜改.
The Song rulers saw his poetry as a threat, a symbol of Southern Tang's lingering influence. And so, they decided to silence him in the most permanent way possible.
Poison, a quiet bitter cup. And just like that, the last ruler of Southern Tang was gone.
But in death, he achieved something remarkable. His poetry outlived his empire, making him one of the most celebrated poets in Chinese history. So, was Li Yu a foolish ruler who let his kingdom slip away, or was he simply too refined for the brutal world of politics?
Maybe both. He was a failure as a king, but a legend as a poet.
His life was like one of his own poems, beautiful, tragic, and unforgettable.
But what do you think? Was Liu a failed emperor or a misunderstood genius? Let us know in the comments below.